Ready to hear about effective ways to market your podcast, not on social media? Or perhaps you're interested in a little behind-the-scenes tutorial of a DIY first season of an audio-only podcast. Well, you're in luck. Today, financial therapist Rachel Duncan pulls back the curtain on her membership, her lead magnet, her podcast production process, and how she's chosen to market her podcast beyond social media. Rachel gives us several tips around how her current funnel is working, where she's running ads, how much she spends, and much more. Rachel, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me. This is great to talk about my niche to other people who are in my niche.
Yeah, exactly. I'm so excited for us to all hear just a little bit about the behind the scenes of your business and about your new podcast. Would you just give us like a high level overview of what you've been up to?
Yeah, so my main work is the Money Healing Club. It is an online membership open to everyone globally. We actually have a very international audience. And in my work as a financial therapist, it's really a place that bridges the practical and the emotional sides of money. And it is educational in nature, but it can get quite emotional. So I tend to work best with people who've been really money avoidant, and they identify as impulse spending as sort of their number one thing. I used to say it's for millennial women, but I've stopped saying that because, well, I have 25-year-olds and 75-year-olds in the club, and I have a range of beautiful spectrum of genders. So as the club has grown and changed, it's becoming more and more inclusive. And it's just a beautiful place. So we do 2 live events a week there. So it's very educational in nature, tons of courses. We record everything, a beautiful, lively discussion board. And it's just a really beautiful and welcoming place. It's also come when you want, leave when you want. And then I also offer some intensives in there and some one-on-ones. So Money Healing Club. And then in November of this past year, I started the Money Healing Club podcast as sort of an extension of that, and also to offer something at no cost to the wider audience. So it's been really fun. The podcast had been on my mind for a while, and it has been really fun to finally do.
Yeah. Okay. I love it. And okay, so you touched on it a little bit, but let's just clarify. You are a financial therapist. And on your website, you've got this like broad range of certifications and things that you've done. And talk to me a little bit about what brought you toward financial therapy. And I'm sure some of the financial advisors and various folks listening are thinking like, some of my people need financial therapy. So help us learn what brought you in, and then how they can kind of gently recommend that someone needs financial therapy.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Yeah. So, I mean, my road to financial therapy was a windy one at the time, but now when I look back, it was straight all along. So I've always been multi-passionate. I really loved math and science as well as the arts growing up. It's just they were pretty equally weighted for me. And I kind of like look back on my life as sort of different chapters. Like one chapter I'd focus more on the emotional and art stuff, and another chapter I'd be doing business, finance, and HR. And so I've always just sort of had these 2 threads going. And until I learned about financial therapy, I was like, well, here are these 2 things totally compartmentalized. Like I'll do therapy for anxiety or perfectionism or epilepsy. It was actually one of my specialties when I was doing straight therapy. But then like a friend would say, hey, could you help me upgrade my bookkeeping? I'm like, okay, I'll do that on the side. So like these 2 totally separate parts of my skills, and really equally loving both of them. And then when I heard about financial therapy during the pandemic, I was like, wait, what? Like I always say, I was handed a permission slip. They're like, oh, I could bring that in. Because I was pretty actively dissuaded from talking about financial self-care in grad school. There's a lot of noble poverty going on in grad school training programs. So it was kind of like, yeah, that side of you, that's fine. Just keep that over here. That's not what therapy is about. So I hope that will change. That's a little side quest I have. But yeah, and so, right, it was really 5 years ago I learned about financial therapy. Yeah, I hopped on. I got certified up, and it was so fun and pretty easy. I was like, oh, I'm already doing this. Like it already felt like really in line. And it was sort of a no looking back kind of thing. And once I started to really identify myself as a financial therapist, it really opened up, just a huge clientele and an endless well of passion for me. And yeah, I'm a total dork. That is all I read. It is all I follow. It is all about financial therapy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you're in a safe space because I would assume anybody listening is also a financial dork, and so am I. So yay, we're all come to the party.
Right. Oh, and we met at FinCon, right?
Yes.
Money nerds unite. That's us.
Exactly. That's my favorite place to be.
It's the best.
I've had various friends say like, oh, what is this conference you always go to? You're always so pumped about it. What is it? And then when I say it's a financial creators content, they're like, oh, do non-financial people go? Because it's like, sounds so fun.
Sure.
I guess. You could still come learn what the financial folks are doing as far as their content. And I guess you could tweak that to your own niche.
Yeah.
But yes, FinCon is one of my favorite places in the world.
That's so great. Yeah.
I'm so glad we met there. Could you share a little bit about, you said you'd thought about this podcast for a long time. What were some of the things that held you back from actually just doing it?
Yeah, it truly was just a bandwidth conversation, I think. So for me, I'm a vocalist. I have sung professionally and in bands. And so it's not for me like a fear of performance or recording myself. I got over that hump. I have no problem with it. And I actually really enjoy the performance side of it. You can see me get all up in this mic. I have no problem with that. It truly was a bandwidth thing. Up until October, I was also lead parent for our kids. We have kids in school. My husband was working full time. So really all of my financial therapy work was really part-time, And so I was doing the most important stuff first, which is client work and, all the stuff that's really pressing. And it just felt like this podcast is a nice to have, but where would I find the time or the quiet space or anything? So actually in the fall, my husband sort of mutually lost his job. And we have had a flip in our roles. And so now he is with the kids full time, and I am now able to do full time on the business. It truly was a few weeks later. I'm like, okay, well, now I have another 3 hours in the day. So it really was a timing thing. I think also kind of maturing into the field, feeling like, okay, yeah, I really do have some stuff to say. Also, just a handful of people, after doing a client call and people saying, you really should do a podcast. I really like listening to your voice. So sort of all of that led up to me finally doing it. And now I'm so glad. I'm so glad I have bridged that, and now it's rolling.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how it's this complementary additional piece of content? You mentioned it earlier. It's like a free gift that you're giving your people, but how it so perfectly sits beside and with all the other things that you're doing. You said you're doing a couple lives each week. To me, I'm thinking, man, I can't even make myself go live once a week. How are you doing this? True introvert here. So yes, how this podcast, it doesn't sound like you needed to create more content in any way if you're already going live twice a week, but you wanted to, you saw the space for it and how it married well with the rest of your content. So can you talk a little bit about that?
One thing I do want to clarify, actually. So the live it's the live events within my membership. That's where I'm going live. So it's towards my paid members, not publicly live.
Okay, there you go.
I've actually more or less left social media. And that is an important part of all of this. Mm-hmm. So I've pretty much left social media. I'm there very lightly because I felt that the ROI wasn't there for me. So yeah, so I do just want to say that. So also, I have no problem getting on camera, even if it's a couple times a day, or microphone or whatever it is, to do it, because I do have a lot of downtime, introverted time in between.
Okay.
So that has felt okay.
That's how you're balancing it.
Yeah. So if we think of an ecosystem, I think the podcast, well, we'll see. We'll see as it continues to grow and change. But I was very clear, being a podcast listener, I listen to a ton of podcasts, that I didn't want the focus to be on interviews. Because what I have seen with some of my friends who have podcasts, who did a lot of interviews, that was great and fun and wonderful, but it didn't get them any traffic. And what I saw is, yeah, because you highlighted your guest, not you. So I kind of knew that I was going to be a bit more egocentric about this going into it, because there's a handful, it's not as popular, of podcasts that are single speaker. And I was like, okay, how can I do single speaker but keep it engaging? Because I think one thing is a dialogue like we're having here, it's a lot more interesting to listen to than someone go on monotone. Like it's a very different feel. So I was like, okay, I want it to really focus on my work and be there for me, truthfully, but to still be interesting to listen to. So I see it as an ecosystem. I know that podcasts are hard to be discovered, but then once people discover, the conversion is usually pretty good. So I was like, okay, I'm building an audience, I'm developing my email list and, all sorts of stuff, referrals. So let's have another little nurturing container with the podcast. So that was my initial intent. Now, though, on the other side of this, what I didn't anticipate is it being really good for retention. Because I have a membership that's pretty low cost, people can kind of come and go. My members who are listening to my podcast I think they feel like it's for them too. Even though they know it's not private to them. So it's sort of, now the podcast is sort of becoming part of the library of resources. Or like, I'll be on a live call with my members and someone's like, oh, didn't you do an episode about blah, blah, blah? Or I love how you said X, Y, Z. So it's like, oh, it's also feeding my ecosystem in more points of contact. It's so intimate. So even my current clients feel even like more strongly connected with me. So that was an unintended effect that I think is really there. And it affirmed my hunch that I needed to keep it about me.
Yes.
To be totally honest.
Yes. So I love that forwardness and honesty about why you designed it the way you did. And there's no rules. There's no right or wrong way. And like you said, you had this hunch about it. You followed your gut, your heart, however you want to put it. And it is working, and you're getting that immediate feedback from your listeners within your first season, might I highlight. So that is just really, really exciting. So since your show is within that first season, and all of this is really fresh for you, could you share just like some behind the scenes of what was hard about starting the show?
Well, what was hard is like, okay, what am I going to talk about? Well, yes, I can talk about money all day long, but I do it in usually response to a client need. So it's like, okay, what am I going to do if I'm not responding to something? So I actually took my cue from the Savage Lovecast. If any of you are familiar with the Savage Lovecast, okay. It's a sex advice podcast, been around forever. And I went on their website because they record voicemails. And so it's a kind of an old-fashioned kind of call-in show, but it's recorded. And I was like, that's what I want. And so I saw that they use SpeakPipe. So I was like, oh my God, and it's free? SpeakPipe is the best. So I was like, that works. If I can respond to a listener question, then I feel like I'm right in like kind of therapy session mode. Although, we're not having a back and forth. And I felt that was important because I don't necessarily want to do like a therapy session recorded. That doesn't feel fair to clients. I don't want to put anyone on the spot. It's like that kind of actually gives a glimpse of how it is working with me. So that's the other thing is like, I want my podcast to not just give people information. I want them to feel like they're working with me. What would it be like to have a conversation with me? So I set up SpeakPipe and I kind of did some nice build up with my email list. Hey, this is coming. And people were like, this is so exciting. Would you talk about this? I was like, could you leave me a voicemail?
Yeah.
And I really pushed it. And I collected, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 voicemails from folks before, I wanted those in the bag before I started producing. And yes, my book club and other friends did it too. Great, whatever. I seeded it. And I will probably need to continue to do that. So then that's super fun. So now I have this little voicemail clip. So I edit it, make it sound good, and then I just answer it as if they're in the room, and I turn it off. So it's not long. I don't want them to be these hour-long things. Plus, since it's not a dialogue, that would get boring. And that is the bulk of my episodes. It's not all of them. I have had some conversational ones, but yeah, I think those for me work the best. They're also more efficient for me to make. I'm not scheduling with someone. They're shorter. But the challenge is getting the voicemails because there's all of this attention at the beginning, which was great. And I still have a few in the bag. But like now that I'm taking a little break for season 2, a lot of that is to collect more voicemails. So it's sort of a different type of listener engagement, and it's an exciting thing to experiment with. And I can also ask my clients and club members to leave voicemails as well. And so everyone's very supportive, which is very cute. But I think people aren't used to leaving voicemails. So there's some learning probably involved there.
Yeah. Yeah. That was my next question was, how are you helping your existing audience engage with this show? Just because you have this feature doesn't mean people are going to do the thing, right? So it kind of, sometimes it feels like pulling teeth, like, hey, please leave me a voice, like give me a question to ask or answer on the show. Because I've put out polls and done things like that before with who I feel is a fairly engaged audience, and it'll be like crickets. And I think everyone has experienced that before, whether it be a social post or whatever, where it's just like nobody's answering or nobody's commenting. So I am curious how you're driving this high level of engagement right out the gate.
Right. I think because it was a new thing, I have a very loving audience. I think they're very much in support of my work. I think the position is this. This is my guess. We'll see how it goes going forward. Is that instead of saying, I want to answer your question to help you, it's, would you help me make this podcast? And I actually think that folks are so much more eager to give than receive. That actually I'm helping Rachel. So I think it's it may be a little counterintuitive, but I think that's the position going forward is you're joining me. I need your help. Yeah. For me as a listener, that helps me. I think what I'm also going to do in my email marketing is, if there's something I write about in a newsletter, will you help me craft an episode about this topic? For example, I got a lot of good feedback about an episode I did actually having a conversation with my husband, who's from Ukraine, about cultural differences in money. I even got a voice message just recently. Someone I don't know said, that was such a great episode. Do more about culture and money. I was like, well, yeah, give me a question. That'd be great. So, I'm thinking, okay, I'll do a newsletter kind of about it or a blog post or something. And then I would love to do this more, but I need your help. I don't know. My hunch is that that's going to be a better ask than, let me answer your question. But I think people want to help me. I think they feel that I'm, generous and kind, and they want this to keep going. And so, yeah, I think that's going to be my position. I will let you know going into season 2 how that goes.
That actually really makes sense because especially in the financial arena, people feel like when they ask a question, they're revealing something about themselves. And that feels really scary. It feels like you're being exposed for whatever financial issues are happening behind the scenes that you're asking about. So it does make sense that you're saying, hey, help me build this around this topic. Give me some questions to ask so that I have an episode to create.
Yeah. And this will help other people. I think that folks would have, that's a little bit easier. Yeah. Because this stuff is super sensitive. I mean,
absolutely.
That's why we're here as financial therapists. Oh, you know what? I realized, Virginia, I didn't answer your other question about.
I was going to lead into that. So speaking of sensitivity,
yes. Right.
How can we properly, nicely, without hurting feelings or offending someone, recommend, hey, financial therapy might really be helpful to you?
Yeah. I mean, just depends on the rapport you have, with your client, of course. And I think, some of the signs are, okay, especially if a person knows, we all know we need to spend less and make more and save the difference. That's personal finance in a nutshell. So it's why doesn't my client do that? Or why did my client buy that watch when they can't afford it? Or why is my client avoiding my calls or not coming in or coming in and crying through the whole thing, right? So when okay, there are some blocks here. Or if a client's really hard on themselves or, whatever it is. So you could see avoidant behavior, self-deprecating behavior, super emotional. I mean, just depends on your style. But I mean, I would keep it very light. I just learned there's this thing called financial therapy. I don't know, you could even say as yourself, I'm finding this really interesting that there are folks out there with mental health background who can help with some of the emotional blocks. Is that something you'd be interested in? Like learning more about? Like, I think positioning yourself as with them, not like you need some different help, but like, hey, there's kind of this cool idea that I'm going to learn more about, or, I just met a financial therapist, or I didn't even know this thing existed. Is that something you'd like to know more about? That's often the question. That gives consent, right? Is this something you'd like to learn more about? And then the client can say maybe, or you can give me some resources. I think the partnership with a financial therapist and a planner is a really cool one, because I'm not going to invest on or advise on stocks and stuff like that. That's not my thing. But what I tell folks is like, I can't do financial planning, but I will get you in a place where you can go to one and not cry and feel confident, So it's a really lovely partnership. Also, I think especially with younger generations, with millennials and Gen Z, we're all pro therapy. I really kind of doubt someone would be super insulted. Just therapy is so normalized now, that might be tougher for an older folks. But I feel like we've broken down that stigma where you could say this could really be helpful for you, right? I know that you have financial goals and this stuff is emotional, and you can just normalize. Of course, this stuff is emotional, right? It's not like you have a problem because this is emotional. No, this stuff is emotional. And really show that you understand that, and that hey, is there something here that could help you along in your journey?
Yeah. I love the way you were able to reframe that. And I would say that even for someone listening, it would be such an easy thing to say, hey, I just heard this awesome, really open, sweet sounding, nice lady on this podcast. She's a financial therapist.
Yeah.
I'm going to follow her. I'm going to give you her handles, and, let's see, hear her content. And I think there's some things in here that we could all learn from.
This might
it would just be an easy message to someone.
Yeah. And I think to express to your clients that, you're kind of in it with them. You get that this is emotional. And I think that's, I love the way you phrased it too. Let's listen to this podcast together. This episode is really great. How fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the power of podcasting, is that someone can, for lack of a better phrase, almost opt in without really committing to anything, right? They can listen to your show, my show, our show, whatever, for free, and then choose to pursue us further if they're sold on it, right? If they're really all in.
It's a really private relationship. I think it's private, it's intimate. It's those driveway moments, that I have all the time with the people I listen to. I really feel like I know them, and it's my little thing. And I get excited when I see a new episode come up. It's a very cool relationship. I really love it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and that speaks to the power of audio and or video, and how it creates trust between your listeners and the expert themselves. And I think that's the piece that's the reason why I even love podcasting and got into it in the first place, because I developed a level of trust with the hosts that I would listen to that guided me through some financial garbage. And I was like, podcasting is where it's at. Every person who needs to establish trust, or who needs to humanize themselves or their business, that's the power of podcasting to me.
And I think the power is that it exists off of social media. It's usually we're consuming it in a time when we're not doom scrolling, or not, we're washing dishes, we're driving, or cleaning the house, or, usually that kind of other tasky thing. I think it's interesting, the mode a listener is in when they're listening to a podcast. It's usually when they're really receptive. They're doing other stuff. Or for me, I've got my entertainment podcast, and I've got my educational podcast. So it kind of depends on the mood I'm in. But, someone said to me hey, when you're doom scrolling, you're not I really should get better with money while you're doom scrolling. People are I just want to check out and see cat videos. So I think it's sort of interesting. I'm sorry, I do have a little bit of a bias with social media, but I think that people are not in the mode of, I want to improve myself. I need the help of a professional in any domain. yes, they might stumble on that, but it's sort of like not what they're looking for. It's not what any of us are looking for when we're doom scrolling. I just want to see some funny stuff usually, or in something interesting, but like I'm not in a purchasing decision mode. And you might not necessarily with a podcast either, but like I do think if you think about like the way we are when we're consuming these different things is very different. I know it is for me.
So stay on that track for a minute, because I think the super common thread that I hear all the time is, I hate social media. I hate it. I want off of it, but I feel like I have to do it. And, I feel stupid on camera, and I hate creating reels, and I just wish I could not do it and still have a business and still attract clients. And you mentioned earlier that you've pretty much gotten off of social media completely. I know many of us go through phases where we're avoiding it, but we still have scheduled posts going up, or there was even like a full year where I didn't post anything. And it was pre-2020. And then, of course, during the pandemic, we were all just craving the face of another human so badly that I kind of got back on. But can you share a little more about your decisions about not being on social media, how you're marketing your business otherwise, and almost like shifting the dependency for client acquisition or communication with potential clients away from this thing that we think we have to do? So, yeah.
Oh, it's been a roller coaster. So I'm like an elder millennial. So like I'm more of like the Facebook generation than the Instagram generation. And I was just always a lurker. I never really contributed, right? It was just social. And a few years ago, I was like, okay, I should really get on social media. And people are like, oh, well, if you feel comfortable in front of a microphone and a camera, you really should do this. And so I worked on it. Like I was doing reels and having some fun with it, learning to edit, I think the thing I really didn't like is what it was doing to me. Is that I'd be like, I remember I took my kids to buy a used bike at the used bike store. And I was like, oh, I want to do a whole reel about this. And I was so distracted catching the shots, da-da-da-da. And then like I made it to this big thing and I sat down and edited it. I never put it out there because it just totally took away from my normal Saturday moment with my kids, that I was excited to put some of this stuff. I wanted to do the things that I saw other people do, but what I didn't like the impact on my personal life, that I felt like everything I needed to record, every good thought I had, I needed to record and put out there. And even though I got just at the point where I got comfortable with it, I even like bought a course. I was like, or not. And there's a couple things there. Part of it was I maybe got a couple clients from it. I mean, there was maybe some nurturing. I think I did get like some speaking gigs or like some podcast connections. That was good. I mean, I'm not saying it was zero, but I also started following this woman, Amelia Freebie, who has a podcast called Off the Grid, which is about doing business off of social media. And I was even on her podcast, and I was like, okay, social media is a tool. It can work. It's not saying it, but it is not a necessity the way that kind of it's built up to be. Especially, I think it has changed in the last few years. I mean, I don't know about you. I feel like Instagram is just like classified ads. Like it's no longer about a beautiful photo. Everyone's selling something, and that's kind of exhausting. The other layer is so much with my clients in the club, getting off of social media is so important for people's finances because they get bad advice, following these grifters. One client was like, yeah, I was convinced for a year that money is made up and so I should just spend it because some influencer was talking about that. Like really bad advice, bad guidance. And then the doom scrolling and the ads and the targeted ads and all of that stuff. Like, it's like, okay, I don't really want to be on the platform that I really support my clients trying to get off of for their mental health and their financial health. So I will say, though, I haven't left it completely. I do. My better performing posts are when I just like copy like funny money memes that other people have said. I send them over to my VA. She puts together a carousel. I put one of those out every few weeks. I've done a few things with the podcast. My VA is like captured, just like with using AI. I'll do a podcast episode. She'll put together a carousel of best quotes, put it up there. So it's scheduled. It's carousels. I removed it from my phone, and I have to say, I feel like I got my life back. It's been about 8 months now, and I got my life back. So I it's just part of my work now. I open up a browser, I check my Instagram if there's any messages, and that is it. So I have not felt like I'm missing out because I get so much more traction from guesting on podcasts, from my professional network, and from my email marketing. And now my podcast. So that stuff, I enjoy doing that. I love writing my emails and I love making the podcast. So I'm just going to keep doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm feeling like I'm going to totally copy you.
Do it, Virginia. The water's fine. I just want to say, like, I'm over here. The water is fine. It's fine.
It sounds amazing because I do still catch myself, I'll go in to check messages, like you said, like, is there anything important? Has someone DM'd me either asking about the podcast or about services or something like that? I'm just trying to check it. Next thing I know I'm an hour down the road and mad about something that's going on in the political sphere. And I'm like, what happened? And how did I get here?
Yeah, like I had
and
goals
where are my
for
kids?
my day. I had goals for my day. Yeah.
like it's bad.
Yeah.
And the same thing even happens when I go into like schedule a post or whatever. If I'm not in a separate window in a scheduler and I open Instagram, like let's say to find someone's handle, that happens again. Like it's so terrible. And I can see what you're talking about, how it's even important.
By design. And I mean, I found my VA on Instagram and I told her like that was the purpose of Instagram and then I closed it.
Yeah.
And it's just perfect. Like not only are we posting on a third party thing, but like it's a different person even doing it. And I will say though, I do run ads. I feel a little bit mixed about that, but they've been performing okay. Like I had done one reel or I'd done a handful of reels, did an experiment, ran them all, paid ads. One of them really performed well, so I can't, turned off the rest. And I've just left that one on and I do $5 a day. So I do that. It seems to build my email list and I don't touch it. So I will say that I do think there's like some in-betweens. Like I'm okay doing a bit of pay to play to save my sanity. Mm-hmm. Also, I think it's changed a lot when the algorithm changed over the summer. They are only promoting paid work. You are not getting any reach if you're not doing paid. Now, that's my feeling. That's what I've heard. There could be social media people out there who are experts who might argue that, but it seems like organic reach has died on social media. So I pay $5 a day.
There you go.
I'm okay with that. That's so worth my time. Like $5 or like an hour lost. Yeah, I can weigh that out.
Yeah. Okay, so you have so beautifully helped us learn how you got off of social media for the most part. And then you've given us a few clues about how you are marketing. So continue on that path and tell us more about how you're driving newsletter subscribers. And if you want to share anything more about your paid ads and how else you're attracting people into your membership or anything like that you want to give other financial professionals some clues as to what is working for you so they could get off of social media and lean into these other spaces as well, that would be super helpful.
Yeah, totally. I think one thing I keep in mind is I heard once that an audience does not mean your clients. Audience is not followers, do not equal clients. So I do think we've got a little bit like brainwashed about that. Okay, so a couple of things I'm doing. No, I would not say any of these are silver bullets. I need to keep tweaking them and they can all be improved. But I created a freebie about a year ago, and that helped so much to direct all of my attention. That is what my paid ad is toward, is my freebie. That is the last slide on all my carousels is get my, I call it a mindful spending challenge. So what I created is a freebie. I definitely overdid it, but that's okay. That's what I do. It is a 7-day free email course on how to spend mindfully. Because the number one thing my clients ask me is, how do I stop impulse spending? So I'm like, okay. So I spent weeks on this. I definitely overdid it. Where it's a beautiful email sequence. Each one has a video with me talking through it so they get a feel of like how I am and how I talk about this. And then there's like a bonus masterclass I give, like a surprise and delight thing on day 8. So it's like, it's daily emails and they're really good. And there's been some conversion for sure with that. However, it's really, I just want them entered into my email because aside from that 7-day, 8-day drip, I always do a weekly thing. Always. So lately with the podcast, I've been sort of unpacking the podcast episode and then link to the podcast episode. But it's not always that. Sometimes it's just thoughts or things that came up in the club or a special promotion. But I tried to make it like pretty good, just content rich email. And there's always a CTA at the bottom. People know how to get in touch with me, like no problem. So then when I am ready to do my webinar, then the audience, I'm like a 50 to 60% open rate. So pretty good. Like people read my emails. So the email course, though, I had read a blog that it's such a good freebie because you can really see engagement. You can go in and be like, oh, people aren't really responding to email 4. Cool. You can go in there and change it. And it's a little more quality than just the PDF download. My feeling is I think the PDF download has kind of had its time. Like, don't we all have all these freebie PDF downloads we've never touched? So I wanted mine to be much more relational. So, and I did all of that in Flowdesk that's facilitated it. So yeah, it's been a good lead funnel. It's been a year. I should probably go into it like this is, revise it and freshen it up a little bit. But that helped clarify to me, okay, the ad goes to get my free course. Now I just want to get people off of social media and into my email. It's amazing how email still really works. And so that's that part. And then I do a free webinar. I really call it a workshop because there's a lot of value there. I do a free workshop about every quarter. I have had some recent success doing it on Eventbrite and boosting it on Eventbrite. This is like the little thing I've discovered, you guys. Put $20 in Eventbrite and I got 120 people signed up.
Wow.
And it had an international reach too. So if you're going to do a webinar, there's a little, I think it's like Boost or something like that. Just do it. Mm-hmm. It's very simple. It's not like Meta. It's not complicated at all. And you put a daily limit, and I got a ton of signups on that. So that was
awesome.
I'm just saying, pay to play. So I do that about every quarter. Yeah.
So what I love about this pay to play thing, though, just the little like sidebar here is you're not spending a ton to do this. People always think like, oh, I can't afford ads or I can't. Pay to play is so expensive. My business isn't there yet or whatever, right? It doesn't sound like you're spending a ton to be able to do this. And it's creating traction for you.
And it's kind of like you can't afford not to because it's all about new eyeballs. You have to constantly be bringing new people into your audience because, that's the only way you're going to grow your warm audience. At a certain point, everyone who was going to buy from you has bought from you. Who knows you? Mm-hmm. Like you're not going to convince them. Yeah. You need new people constantly. So then I will say, though, the most effective thing has been guesting on other podcasts that I actually just had I was a guest on a podcast that just released a few days ago. I got like 3 people in the club from that. And I could tell because I do a little coupon code and they joined. So it's like that trust built, like if listeners are already trusting that host and then I come in, do my thing, a lot of trust is built. So that has been a little accidental. I haven't been as strategic about those guesting things. I've been really lucky too. But actually my VA now is we put together a letter and now we're just going to be a little more concerted and like reach out to podcasts for me to guest on just because I know that it works and I love it. Yeah. So those are, that's what my marketing looks like. And just referrals. I've got a few listings in places. I have a paid listing with a financial therapy association. That has definitely paid for itself. So it's like paid listings, paid ads, and being guests on podcast is, and then nurturing within the email and keep up the weekly emails and make them really good.
Yeah. Yeah. So share with me, well, first I want to highlight that you talked about doing solo episodes and almost, humbly saying like, I know that I need the focus to stay on me because this is my podcast and I'm developing a relationship with my people. And the fear there as the podcast manager would be, I cannot allow you to podcast in a silo because you will not grow your audience. But you've created this marketing plan so that you're not podcasting really in a silo and that your solo episodes are still working for you because you're doing these other things. And even in the podcasting space, you're still networking because you're guesting on other people's shows. Whether you choose to have guests on your show in the future or not won't diminish your growth because you're guesting.
I hope so. Yeah. And I will say, like, I think my plan is, especially for the next season, I think I will have a few guests, but really careful. Like, there's a real reason they're there. And we're there to have a conversation, not me interview them. So that I just had that clarity actually this week. So it still goes along with a purpose. And then they're kind of like little showstoppers or like, hey, yeah, that can help build my audience. But and I'm not building it to monetize this podcast. So I just like, that's off the table. That's not what it's about. So, and then what I'm looking forward to is then running dynamic ads on my podcast for the timely stuff that I have. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, we'll see, Virginia. I'll check in with you at the end of the second season where I'm like, I ran out of ideas or, it didn't grow. Then I'm needing to rethink things.
No, this is great. And I feel like you've been so strategic about where you're spending your time and your money. And I think that's the biggest takeaway. And something I would love to hear from you is more about the guesting piece, because this is something I'm kind of nudging all my clients to do, is not just to have guests on, but that you need to go and be a guest on other podcasts as part of working the network of podcasters and other financial professionals. Yes, but also the whole borrowed audience thing. But let's be clear, you can go and guest and not get clients from that episode. So there are certain things that you're probably doing well, Rachel, that I would love for people to hear how you're interviewing and getting guests. And you mentioned a coupon code. And so you do have a very specific offer for that audience. And there are clues that you're leaving, but I would love to just hear what else you're doing to help make sure that you're spending that time wisely on these other podcasts.
That's a really good point. I mean, it kind of depends on the host too, right? Mm-hmm. It's really the skill of the host. And so there's always a little risk, like, how is it going to go? But I would say that I was on there's 3 podcasts that I was on that were already pretty well established. So there was a real, that worked out. There was Price of Avocado Toast. Yeah. You know those guys, Haley and Justin. Yes. There was Off the Grid that I had mentioned, where she really wanted to talk about overcoming under earning. So it was actually the host wanted to know for herself. So it was very cool.
Very cool.
And then from that, I was on the Baggage Reclaim podcast, which is out of Britain, which is about pretty deep, emotional work. Well, just in general, not even about money, but it was like, wow, it was very intimate. So I think the 3 of them, they were really experienced podcasters. And I went into it. Here's my vibe. I don't want to be like, I know so much and I'm the expert and blah, blah, blah. I want to show what it's like to sit with me. I want to be in that interview. I hope I'm doing now a little bit, the way I am with a client. So I think that's part of it. I really want it to be conversational. I mean, it's really nice when a host is organized like you and has their conversations, their questions and everything, so we can really go back and forth. I will try to make sure I ask my host a question. Mm-hmm. I may even spring one on you, Virginia, to just give a little bit of a taste. What is it like working with me? How am I different? Yeah. So I think that's one. I think having just comfort I'm comfortable with a mic. I just, I think there's just a level of getting used to the mic. I will say my little crash course in trying to do social media, it was really good in me getting used to recording myself. Even though I ended up not using a social media, I was like, this is how I look and this is how I sound. I'm not going to change that. And it's great. It's like this process of self-love. So I think there's that. I am in myself. I show up. I like showing up. I like connecting with people. So yeah, and then I always do a little coupon code, which helps me track. I usually do 50% off your first month in the club or something like that. And then, it never expires. So that's been nice, just for my tracking as well. That's funny. Some people join and they forget the coupon code, but that's fine. So I just make it just really inviting. And I talk about my my email course. So I don't call it a freebie. I say, get my free email course to stop impulse spending. That's a good plug. So that's like my main thing on my link tree. Like everything is free email course. So that's what I try to plug the most.
Yeah. And you're right. Even when you say it, it sounds like this more valuable thing than just this free downloadable worksheet or free PDF or whatever. So I think that's a really cool option that maybe some people haven't thought about. Or if they've heard of it or seen it done before, maybe it was on the back burner and you kind of forgot. But you're saying
it's
working
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but it was really front loaded. I mean, literally, like I made it a year ago. I added video in the summer. I spent way too long on it, as I'm sure I've said. But then, I haven't looked at it. And it's just run along, I got the idea from Jay Klaus, who's a wonderful podcaster with Creator Science. His email is great. And he said the one thing he wished he had done sooner was do a free email course, because it was working so well for him. So I was like, I'm going to take a note from Jay. Oh, I met Jay at FinCon, actually. That's how I knew about him. So
there you go.
Yeah, I get a ton of inspiration from the people I follow and, listen to and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Well, and that's part of why this show exists, is just so that other financial professionals can see what's working, some things that you worked through and what's working well for you. And I want to just hang out on the podcast just a little bit longer and talk about this first season, what some maybe issues were as far as, did you struggle with equipment setup? I know you said your husband found this really cool mic for you. So I'm thinking maybe he's the tech guy and like helped you set that up. But did you have any other issues or roadblocks that you felt like other financial professionals need to know about or that you could help them navigate?
Yeah, while my husband did source the microphone, that's it. I have done everything else.
There you go.
My experience in music, I never was really involved in like production of music, like on the tech side, but I feel like I have a good ear, like I kind of know. And also being a podcast listener, like I kind of knew like the feel and when something sounds right and doesn't sound right. Like I'm perfectly fine with retakes and stuff like that. So let's see, what are some of the things? I did a little soundproofing under my door. I have like a big gap in my door. So it's like a few things like that. I got like a rug that fills my whole room. This room is a little bit more echoey than I'd like, but I find that with this mic, it does work out in post-production. I use Descript. I have not used a ton of other ones, but I really like it. I really, really like Descript. So for my solo ones, I'm recording directly into Descript. I have been focused on audio only. I know you're a big fan of video too. And what I'm thinking is I will do that in season 2. I just kind of just wanted to focus on audio and not slow down the process with video too. But what I'm thinking is I'm still audio first. But I will record video to use as snips for my VA to put on social media, is sort of what I'm thinking strategically going forward. But I like just starting video, sort of like, it's not that it's easier, it's just narrowed my focus. So I record directly into Descript. And if you're not familiar with Descript, although I think a lot of other programs do this now too, it transcribes your audio right there, and then you edit the text. And then you can get, like, if you're like, oh, that didn't quite work right, you can get into the actual like little sound wave for more minute editing. But all in all, it's great. You just take out the ums and ahs. And then I love it because like when I'm recording, I can like gather my thought, pause for 5 seconds and then start talking. And then when I go into it, I shorten that to a half second and it all works. And then it has there's a feature called Underlord, which does like all the AI stuff and their studio sound. Don't do 100% because it takes away the S's, but I have found 80% is perfect.
Yeah.
So I do 80% on studio sound, do my little editing, little moving around. Sometimes I need to re-record that sentence. I do that. I have a template with my intro and outro. I found a little musical clip that I fiddled with in Audacity. So I've got this little guitar riff that begins it and ends it. And there you go. And then I use Podbean to distribute it. I upload it on Podbean. Then when it comes to show notes, I've been trying around with a couple different things. I do use the AI-generated show notes just to kind of help me get going, but I usually kind of rewrite them. I'm needing to fix some of my old show notes because I was still figuring it out. But and then I get that. So I publish it on Podbean, and then I send it to my VA, and she makes a post on my website. So that's a separate effort. Yeah, and that has been a pretty good process. It's still really me doing everything, but again, I enjoy it. And also I feel like if it's my voice, I want to be the one to edit it, really. That's been it. Descript has been great for me, but I know that there's a lot of options out there, but it's been good for me. And I can invite my there was a little while where my VA was coming into Descript. Then I found I didn't really need that, but you can just like pay for an extra seat for a few weeks. So if you need someone to get in there with you, it's very collaborative. And then I know it's great for video editing too. I just haven't really used that yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that the kind of tech you were talking about?
Yeah, no, this is perfect. So there have been a few guests on that have said, a couple of the principles that you are following, actually. So one of them was start with what you can now. Do not add video if that's going to add a layer of complication and make you not start your podcast now. Yeah. So kudos to you on that.
Thank you.
And then another guest, Pete McPherson, actually, if anybody wants to go back to that episode.
He was a FinCon too, wasn't he?
He's a FinConer. Mm-hmm. But he said he strongly believes that when you start your podcast, that you should edit yourself for a little while because you learned so much about yourself through the process and how you sound and the verbal crutches that you have. And not that you would be so critical of yourself, but that you would just learn so much about the process so that when you hire someone, you're really informed about what you're hiring for. And if you enjoy the process or if you don't, and all the nuances within that. So you are doing this yourself. And then I want to highlight the programs that you mentioned that you're using that I fully support.
Okay, good. I was I hope Virginia is okay.
Yes. Yes. So members of my team may or may not use Descript. I do not police what they use to edit, but Descript is the DIY editor that I recommend for people who want to start on their own and who want to dabble with it and, check out the studio sound feature. That is one of my favorite features of that program.
It's really good. It really removes background noise. I'm amazed at the audio before I put on studio sound and afterwards. That sounds so good.
Yes. And I agree with you that, everybody should definitely play with the little percentage that it has available there because 100% is a bit strong and it will do different things to different people's voices. Like for you, it removes the S's. For other people's, it creates a weird tone inside their voice. So you do just have to adjust the percentage and listen to yourself to say, does that sound like me? And are all of my syllables coming out correctly? And do I hear a weird buzz in the background or not? There's different things that could happen because it is an AI filter, for lack of a better term. So Descript, yes. Podbean is actually the podcast host account that I use as well. There are lots of great ones out there. A little side note for listeners that if you do want to do video podcasting, I think it's $29 a month or something through Podbean. It will give you enough data to where you'll actually upload your video in. And that video, there's only a couple platforms that accept video right now, but your video podcast can actually show up on Apple and Spotify.
That is a hot tip. Now, do you do two files? Do you do an audio and a video then?
So you just do the video. And what would happen then is on the audio only platforms, it would just pull your audio off of the video.
Oh, okay.
So the difference there is that a lot of times when we are editing something that's audio only, you can clip and silence and rearrange and do quite a bit more edits than what you can with video.
Right, because if it's corresponding to the video, it's going to be all like weird.
Yeah. So sometimes on video, we can't cut out a mistake because the host is in a different position, or
it just looks weird. Yeah, it looks
So you've got that visual element to be really aware of. And that's where that video first piece comes in, because sometimes there are edits that we cannot make because it will disrupt the video so badly. So when you're listening to an audio version of a video show, you're going to hear a lot more than what you're used to.
It's not as clean as pure audio.
Exactly.
Actually, I really appreciate that tip.
Exactly. Well, and because that's, I think, some of the confusion of this video first movement. In so many cases, we are editing separately a video and audio for a client because they still want the audio version to be super, super clean. And in that case, what we're doing is actually having 2 host accounts. So you may have a host account with one email where you're on the lower data level of Podbean, where you have like $9 a month or whatever the price is. And then you also have in a different email, you have that baller level where you're paying $29 a month or whatever it is for that audio, for that video version.
That's worth looking at. Okay, so you are doing the separate, so you're not sacrificing one for another.
Sometimes, yes.
It's more work, but that's interesting. Yeah, especially.
Exactly.
I do want to play a little bit with the video and see. One thing I'm kind of thinking is instead of, I'd love to know what you think about, having the effectiveness of a whole video for a podcast versus like having some video to make some snips from some clips for social media. That's obviously kind of a separate effort. What do you think about those 2 options?
For me, I think neither works better than the other. It all is about the host and the sustainability that they have for themselves in maintaining production.
Right, because that's like a level of production I can barely squeak by with what I'm doing now.
Exactly. So if recording the entire full-length video, editing that separately, having that additional host account, and editing this audio version and having that, it does get complicated.
It's a lot.
It really does. So if that is a barrier, don't do it. Because you're going to drop it. You're going to get burnt out.
Yeah,
I would rather you start something that's more simple, that's sustainable, that you can stick with long term, and you can choose down the road to add a layer of something when you have bandwidth, rather than you getting overwhelmed in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I could see that. Because like I had this vision, I'll bank all of these and then put it out there. But then, there was a learning curve and stuff where like I had a few done when I announced the podcast. So that was good. And then the holidays went by and I'm like, oh no. So I'm like editing these things like the hour before I'm publishing them. And that's how it's been for the last 8 weeks. And it's been fine. But like, that's also why I'm closing this season. Cause like, okay, I'm not doing that again. I'm going to have this break to, really nurture my audience, to get some more content, really carefully choose the speakers. So like the next time in April or May, I have 12 done. Like I want it done. All the copy, the show notes, what I'm going to do on social media. Like I want it to be done, and I will rely on my team to help with that. Like I still want to take the lead on it, but like, okay, lesson learned. And that was a tip I got from someone who's been podcasting who had like committed to doing a weekly one. And she told me, I wish I had done seasons instead of committing myself to just doing this every week forever and ever. So that helped me because I work in sprints more. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do like a 12 episode sprint. No, it's a 13 episode sprint. And then have kind of a low time. That's going to work well for me, I think. So I thought that was some good advice.
Yeah, I agree. And I always tell creators that even if on the outward view, it looks like you're just doing weekly ongoing, you have the power to structure it behind the scenes for yourself to where you are operating like seasons.
I could see that.
And I think that is super, super powerful for someone who's like, but I feel like you got to do weekly to build an audience. And, they may be getting some advice from whoever guru, but their life doesn't work like this, weekly Tuesday, 10 a.m., it's going to happen every time. No, It's not. So you may as well batch record and operate internally as if you're doing seasons, but then for
It's
your
actually
published
out
dates.
there still. I love that. Oh, that's a goal. Okay, now I have a new life goal.
Life goal.
I need to like produce more. And I mean, it is one thing like having the shorter episodes where it's just me, I can churn them out faster than the interviews. So, you know, that's another advantage to having more of my episodes like that.
Yep. Yep. I love this. Thank you so much for chatting podcasting with me.
Okay, well, can I show a little thing that I do with my host sometimes?
Absolutely. Show me. And then before we end, I want to make sure that we get to hear where to find and follow you as well.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yes.
So
Okay.
Virginia,
Show me what you do.
I want to ask you something that I ask all my clients, my favorite creative exercise. Virginia's completely on the spot here, y'all. I did not prepare for this. Okay. I want you to go with your first intuitive hit.
Okay.
And I ask you to picture your money as a creature. What's the first? Your face is awesome.
I'm like, is that a bunny? Like, I don't know what
It is.
that
It's always, okay, capture that. It's always right. It's
Okay.
never wrong. Okay. You have a bunny. All right.
I got like a flash of like some ears. And so I'm thinking that's a bunny.
Okay. Let the image kind of take some shape
Okay.
a little bit. And tell me what you are noticing.
I mean, it's outside.
What's it up to?
I'm getting like sunshine and greenery. The hopping. That's why I thought it was like a bunny. I just can see the ears.
Yeah, the hopping. I can see this scene with you. I want you to ask this creature what it needs from you right now to feel complete.
Like more space.
More space, yeah. That's lovely. Do you think you could give that to the creature right now?
I think so.
Yeah. How does it respond?
I've got to think about what that means. I need to sleep on that.
It's first off, it's always right. And second off, you might not know what it means. You can actually, when you have that visual, like literally give it more space in that visual.
Okay.
Yeah. We don't have to jump to meaning making. That's the other side of your brain.
Nah.
This is
The
right
one
side
that's
of the
always
brain,
working.
Right? And the one that personal finance always talks to. So I like talking to the right side of the brain that has just as much financial knowledge. So this exercise is something I tap into again and again. My money has been a worm, a whale, a boat, a flock of birds, right? It's different every time. This is not about spirit animal or anything like that. And asking that creature what it needs from you and starting this dialogue. So I will do art making with my clients around that, journaling, and often there's such great information. So often our money, wants more space, wants a structure, wants more food, wants to be closer. And a lot of these themes come up. And so when I talk about we're going to heal your relationship with money, like we're literally going to treat it like a relationship that you have. Like with a creature or with a thing or with a person or with an image. And there's so much more healing that goes on with that when we can start to use all of our wisdom with money. So that's a little sample of what it's like to work with me.
That is so cool.
Does that give you a sense, right?
Absolutely.
Bit like, okay, what's this Rachel girl about?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure people can tell at this point, but I just love chatting with you, and I enjoy your personality anyways, and I
enjoy yours.
Thank you. And I think that absolutely any kind of session with you or anything like that would just be equally as open and kind of free flowing and not intimidating in any way. Right. So I think that's the most important piece right there.
Yeah. My little byline is the softest place to land in personal finance. I really try to make that in everything I do.
Yeah, that is so perfect. And I'm so curious how you came up with that, knowing that you are that soft, safe place.
I think it's from people telling me. Yeah. Yeah. Like, this is like a soft place to land. I was like, ooh, that's good.
That's really good. Like, can everyone just please come up with a tagline for our businesses like that?
Listen to what your clients actually say about you and about this work and use those words. That's like, that marketing 101 thing that I'm really glad I learned early on. It's so hard when you come out of academia, you get a master's degree and they're like, the fortitude of the, you're using these like $5 words, and no one speaks like that. You got to speak you got to write how you speak. You got to write how your clients speak. And it gets really poetic and fun and creative and unique when you can do that. And that's an ongoing process, of course.
Yeah. Thank you. I love that. So before you go, can you tell us where to find and follow you? And if someone's interested in this email course that you have?
Yeah. Okay. So everything lives at moneyhealingclub.com. If you go there, you'll see a little pop-up to get on the email, but it's also at moneyhealingclub.com/challenge. And I am very lightly on Instagram at Money Healing Club. So you can find me there. Sometimes. You can sometimes find me there.
Yeah. Or your assistant.
You'll find Harsha. She's great.
Either way, the DM would reach you. So
yes, the DM would absolutely reach
piece.
me. I'm big on email. So I would love to. And I love chatting with folks anytime.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here and sharing all of your wisdom with us today.
Thank you, Virginia, for having me. It was super fun.